I'm going to have to start calling this segment Miller Watch or something like that, because there's no end in sight. Ezra Miller continues this rampage across the United States in what can only be described as Bonnie and Clyde minus Bonnie, unless one of the several elevated beings is counting as Bonnie, I don't know. But regardless, there's a lot going on with Ezra Miller, and the reason that we're talking about this today, yes, I know some people are tired of hearing about it, and it's totally fine if they don't want to watch these types of videos anymore, that's fine. But the reason we're talking about this today is because, again, this is the individual who still has a job, okay? This is the person who still works with Warner Bros., who still, of course, is going to be in The Flash, regardless of whether or not they use this person going forward, because there was a lot of reports that no matter what, after The Flash, there will be no more Ezra Miller relationship with WB. But regardless, of course, we recently saw the cancellation of Batgirl. There's been a lot of different, opinions around that on both sides. Some people saying, well, hey, the test screenings were bad, maybe we dodged a bullet. Other people kind of pointing out, and by the way, me included, that it's a little unfair to, Leslie Grace and the cast of that, whether that movie was good or bad, to basically have them do all that work and then just randomly choose to not release it and eat the cost on it after promoting it. It's just bizarre. But regardless, Johnny Depp also in the last few years was treated like trash by Warner Bros., in my opinion, where they basically outed him out of their movie in terms of the Fantastic Beasts films. Then, of course, he also got the same treatment from Disney with Pirates of the Caribbean, etc. And what does that all have to do with Ezra Miller? Well, Ezra Miller, just like Amber Heard, is somebody who has been caught on tape with a lot of garbage in their life, right? Ezra Miller is somebody who, just like Amber Heard, has been recorded doing bad things. Amber Heard, was recorded with the whole nobody will believe you, nobody will believe you're a victim, Johnny thing, and a lot of other lies. And Ezra Miller has been caught with so many things. There was the 2-month stint in Iceland, where essentially there was a lot of different issues with young people. And Business Insider has actually done a very good job of documenting a lot of this and getting to new information that we're going to talk about today. So if you enjoy this video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. I do cover this stuff as it comes up because I'm not super interested in these actors' personal lives unless they're really nice people and, they got something cool going on, like they run a hobby farm or something cool like that. Then I'm kind of like, oh, that's nice. But when it comes to someone like Miller, it's just insanity and hypocrisy on a whole nother level when it comes to Warner Bros. And pretty much every company who has worked with this person. So, of course, we have talked before about a lot of these things. I'm going to first hit the new things first, and then we'll kind of go back. But some of the new stuff happening that's crazy is the report from Business Insider that Ezra Miller travels the United States carrying at least one firearm at all times and wearing a bulletproof vest, paranoid about being followed by the FBI and the Ku Klux Klan, people told Insider. By the way, it's important to note that a lot of the people who talked to Business Insider were close associates or ex-friends of Ezra Miller. However, they didn't want to be identified because they believed Ezra Miller would retaliate against them. So that is how out there this person is, that even friends, even allegedly family members, neighbors, business co-partners, stuff like that, are just straight up narking on them, ratting on them to the press and to other places because nobody will stop what's going on. But of course, Takata Iron Eyes, which this is kind of where Takata Iron Eyes comes into the situation, who should not be a public figure regardless, because Takata is just a person who was, I guess, a preteen or teenager at the time that Ezra Miller met Takata. And essentially what ends up happening, the parents went through this whole thing with Business Insider and with other places where it's been chronicled, but the allegation is that Ezra Miller was grooming Takata, that they had a relationship in terms of friendship, first off, with encouraging music and other talents and stuff like that, but it's hit the point where Takata travels around the United States and other countries with Ezra, which is bizarre because this was going on allegedly before Takata was 18. So it's just kind of a weird situation where you have a 20-something-year-old kind of dragging a 17, 16, whatever year old person around traveling with them. and then it hits the point where now that person is 18. So that's kind of the whole Takata Iron Eyes situation. And the reason that it's important to mention that is because this person actually went on to say that the vest that Ezra Miller wears was a fashionable safety measure in response to actual attacks and received death threats. Takata Iron Eyes has kind of stuck up for Ezra Miller at every turn. However, when we get to more information about this, that's kind of where this starts to fall apart and get absolutely insane. And you're going to hear me clicking around because I try and get all my facts right, stuff like that. But Ezra Miller has been accused of several crimes throughout that traveling spree. And now, of course, Ezra Miller is cited for felony burglary after allegedly stealing alcohol from a Vermont home. This is from CNN. And the reason I picked CNN, even though they are a meme to most people, is they're at least a mainline news source. But this has been reported by like 50 other news outlets. I just picked it because I can say I cited CNN here. So I get my brownie points. But regardless, the thing with this that's funny to me is that the whole story is just insane because police were alerted to a possible burglary on May 1st, and police found that several bottles of alcohol had been taken from the residence. Surveillance footage and statements gave police probable cause to charge Miller. So basically, there was very likely surveillance footage of Ezra Miller actually breaking in and stealing this stuff, or going in and stealing this stuff. Otherwise, they wouldn't cite that as evidence. Then, of course, after that, it gets worse. They're now being ordered to appear before the court, essentially, later on, in order to either contest or not contest this, I believe on September 26th, for an arraignment on the burglary charge. Miller's representatives have not responded, of course, as always, but that's where we get into even more news as well, because in this whole expose done by Business Insider, where more is talked about, they actually spoke to 14 different people who had recent interactions with Ezra Miller, in which the actor exhibited frightening emotional outbursts, carried firearms, or left them feeling unsafe. Some people said Miller sought out impressionable young women and non-binary people whom they could isolate from their families and control. In some cases, Miller had sexual relations with these people. In 2020, during a roughly 2-month stint in Iceland, where Miller walked the streets barefoot, rumors spread that the movie star was running a cult out of an Airbnb. Then we went on to over the last 6 months, the actor was driving around with guns and stuff. Here's the thing, by the way, for me, I don't care about the guns thing. Like, I care if they're registered or not registered. But for me, I know people who conceal and carry. I own a firearm because of my business, like what I do. My dad taught me all about them. And I know a lot of, I never was in the military, but I know a lot of military stuff in terms of like firearms and other stuff like that because of safety measures. I've taken classes and done all kinds of stuff like that because for me, when you are, I don't want to call myself a public figure. I think that's douchey. But when you're somebody where people could show up at your house and try and hurt you or your family, right, in that way you're public, I always think that, to me, it's a smart thing if you are a responsible individual who can handle a tool like that to have it at your disposal for defense. That's my opinion. So I don't care about this whole traveling around with a gun thing. If this is like a registered firearm this person has and it's a conceal and carry or something like that, whatever. Like, to me, that's beside the point. The same way I believe that the whole sexual gender identity thing is beside the point. It does still play into it because I believe these things are used as shields by Ezra Miller. So, for example, if you've noticed when there's criticism of Ezra Miller, even for me, I'm careful to say they. Why do I actually do that? Is it really because I respect Ezra Miller? Because I really care about all the politics behind it? Because I know that it's like very important to gender Ezra Miller correctly? I'm going to be honest. No, I frankly don't care. I've gotten into arguments over this with people before. I believe you start out getting respect, and once you start being disrespectful, once you start doing things like breaking the law copious amounts of time in ways that are very bad. I'm not talking speeding tickets. I'm talking allegedly grooming people and being caught on camera choking somebody in Iceland, which happened, by the way. There's footage of that in terms of surveillance footage for this bar or restaurant or wherever it was. Then, of course, the whole grooming allegations. Then this burglary charge, then the assault charge, I believe, from earlier against Miller with a family, and then, of course, other allegations of grooming and stuff like that, and having intercourse with young people who it's kind of looking more and more like, to me, this is looking more and more like a drug-fueled lifestyle that either led to a psychotic break or some kind of disconnection with reality, because you even have, and we're going to talk about some a quote from someone who knows Ezra Miller personally here in a minute to back that up. But for me, the reason that I do stuff like that is because people use it as an excuse not to listen. They use it as an excuse to defend Ezra Miller or defend other people. And the idea, I think, is that in our society, right, we've been so ingrained with these groups, with these almost cults of idea. No matter what they are, they can be religious, they can be sexual or gender directed, they can be based on good things, they can be based on bad things. We see this all the time. We see this where people abuse these powers. Like, they can be on either side of the aisle a politician, or they can be any religion and they might be hurting children, right? They might be Catholic or they might be Islamic and they're hurting children. But then if you go after that, the idea is essentially you have to go after the religion. Like, people make it about that, right? Where it's, you're not hitting the person's acts, you're hitting the person's ideology, and then everyone's involved. The reason I'm so careful to say that is not necessarily because I respect Miller and think that Miller's pronouns deserve respect. I've gotten in an argument with someone about this before. I don't think they do. I think the people who think that they do, that someone who's probably doing stuff with children and stuff like that deserves respect is ridiculous to me. But because people use it as an attempt to avoid it, right? To avoid what's going on and not hold this person accountable. And I think a lot of people in Ezra Miller's life have done the same, haven't held any accountability to this individual, because there is a quote here about that from someone who knew the person, saying, I think Ezra has been enabled because of their fame, their wealth, their earning potential, their whiteness, so like their race, and their beauty. A longtime family friend of Miller's told Insider, it's really hard to intervene when someone has as many resources as Ezra. When you're famous, people are less likely to say no to you. I think that those things can be really dangerous. And they can, by the way, cause a disconnection from reality, where you're basically living off in your own world, especially when things like drugs are involved and other stuff like that. We've seen a lot of people bounce back from things like that. But of course, there's also the route of the Charles Manson type, where it starts to go down this rabbit hole of no one ever says no, and it becomes a cult of personality. And then, of course, it can lead to death and other stuff. I think what's really sad about this is that this person's absolutely right. Ezra belongs to so many of these groups. Ezra is a pro-gun person. So for a long time, I know there were a lot of Republicans who were actually a fan of Miller being a mainstream person who wasn't anti-gun. So that was a big thing. Ezra Miller is a member of the LGBTQ. So there's a lot of people who saw themselves in Ezra Miller there. And then when there's an attack on Ezra Miller, it's an attack on you, your person. When you get into all these groups, I think you start having a problem, because Ezra Miller, in my opinion, uses these groups as shields. When you watch the arrest video, which is just insanity because there was one, it becomes this whole meltdown about how Ezra's Fourth Amendment rights are being violated, and a male police officer shouldn't be touching the penis of Ezra Miller, which is weird to me because maybe that male police officer doesn't even identify as male. We don't know. I thought Ezra's whole point was acceptance and inclusion. Of course, whenever you go against Ezra Miller, the point, it changes from acceptance and inclusion to things like flashing guns, allegedly. So that certainly is not a good thing. What's really sad to me, though, is that all of this stuff kind of continues, and there's so much information on it and so many things that Ezra Miller has done. People in Ezra Miller's life are really grieving the person they've lost, the longtime family friend said, because I don't think that person is coming back. This is an individual who has just completely gone over the edge, in my opinion, and, everybody says, like, they should get help, they should do this, they should do that. Well, of course, there are also reports that WB has done very little to try and get this individual help. and instead opted to keep the organization's head down and try and avoid the fallout from it. But of course, that's not really doing anything, like that's not helping at all. It's very, very annoying to me because Miller kind of said this a while ago, saying the cults of celebrity and the fanatics of celebrities, that's what governs the world now. So you're a politician or you're whoever, you're just a celebrity with a fan club like me, and we're all probably mentally ill. I watch television or the news and I'm like, oh, it's my people. We're all mentally ill together. Cool. But then instead of this becoming quirky behavior, kind of like I'm not perfect, it continued to spiral out of control in 2019, and it's hit the point where it hit today. By the way, some accusations we never talked about on the set of 2019's Asking for It. Apparently there was a lot of weird stuff going on, like Ezra wearing long robes and a cape despite really hot temperatures. So again, this doesn't mean drugs, but this is something that is often a byproduct of drugs, your body temperature not feeling the way that it should in terms of where you are actually in reality. Then they talked about, of course, more things with Miller not showering and smelling horrible and not taking care of personal matters like that. The production staffer about this movie said it was startling. Miller seemed to be just floating from place to place, room to room. Then, while filming the TV series The Stand, Miller incessantly screeched, spit, and interrupted the director by screaming during filming. Kevin Armstrong, an extra on the show, said a second person said Miller would yell erratically on the set to get a reaction out of people. And then it keeps going. Which this is weird because at one point just before the camera started rolling, Armstrong said Miller screeched out an offensive joke. It was something to the effect of a Jew, a black man, and a gay man walk into a bar and the bartender said, "Hey, what are you doing here? You don't belong here." That's it. That's the joke, I guess. Then, of course, people complained about Miller's behavior, but then it was defended as method acting, which is, of course, a ridiculous defense. Again, then in 2020, there was a lot of issues on Fantastic Beasts, Secrets of Dumbledore. Crimes of Dumbledore would be funnier. It's really frustrating to me because this is somebody who had a lot of potential to do a lot of stuff good in the world and make things and better the world in many different ways. And of course, here we are. We're just at Ezra Miller, the angry, raging maniac who apparently pulls guns on people who don't know where Parcheesi is from or don't agree with where Parcheesi is from, and allegedly grooms young women and non-binary individuals, which, again, the reason that this is such a big deal to me is because I believe this is a shield. Ezra Miller uses this ideology and this identity as being non-binary because it might not be a popular thing to say, and I know it's not, but there are certain defenses in culture against making fun of or criticizing these groups in any way. If you're white, for example, and you start criticizing a black person, the first thing that comes up is racism, right? If you are straight and you start criticizing somebody who's LGBTQ, even if it has nothing to do with that at all, if it has something to do with their actions, the first thing that comes up is homophobia or biphobia or anything like that, right? People use these groups now to hide behind what they're doing. And I think that Ezra Miller is just the first person smart enough out in the public eye to do this well. We've seen people do this before with like trans identities, and very few people do this, but where they use it to be a predator and prey on other people. It's a minority of a minority of a minority, but it's something that happens. And the problem is that all of this stuff, all of these groups, all of these giving goodwill towards others and assuming positivity only works up to the point where you encounter an individual who's nutty enough to go off the deep end and use these things to justify, use these things to shield, or use these things to prey upon. When we have actual implications like Ezra Miller using non-binary, well, always, by the way, with women, with girls, in terms of biological birth, okay? when we have these accusations where it's always someone who was born a woman that Ezra Miller seems into, and Ezra Miller's going after either non-binary people who are already struggling with identity issues and, trying to figure out who they are, who are very young, to, of course, young women who often go through the same stuff. Young men do too. We're just better at hiding it and better at pushing past it and ignoring it, whereas women try and actually deal with that stuff in generalities as they go. And there are actual studies on brain psychological differences in a lot of people and how they handle their trauma and handle different things like that, which you can look into. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but when you get into this kind of stuff where it's basically all of this stuff and spending their first day at a hotel reciting pagan chants, smoking the devil's lettuce, relaxing in the hot tub, Miller, the young woman, and another woman having a threesome. This was with a 18-year-old in Iceland, according to reports. When you get to all this stuff like that, it's not that these things are necessarily illegal, right? Like 18-year-olds and stuff like that. But it's just a very odd, repetitive pattern of skewing young. You never see Ezra Miller go after a man. You never see Ezra Miller go after a woman in her 30s or a non-binary individual in the 30-year-old age range. It's never somebody who has their shit together, who's composed and knows who they are. It's pretty much always somebody who's young, who's an easy target. And then what's the defense when Ezra Miller does this stuff? It's, well, I'm non-binary. It's, well, my pronouns are they, them. I don't want a man touching my parts down there. I want somebody else to arrest me. People are committing hate crimes against me. All this kind of stuff you see on camera on all of these reports and all these news clips and in all of these articles. And it's just sad to me because I think that it's sad to have to include that element in here. It should only be about the actions. But when the people committing those actions start using their group to defend the actions, which we've seen throughout history with all kinds of various groups protected in different ways, it always leads to problems. When someone's always above criticism or above reproach or above retaliation for something stupid, like misgendering them or like, being straight and talking about them and they're gay, or being white and talking about them and they're black or whatever. To me, this is the same kind of crap that we were trying to get rid of throughout history, where like something would happen to a black man at the hands of a white person and nobody would believe it, or nobody would want to hear it because of that difference. Now we're just experiencing that in a different way, where it's like, yes, on a more level playing field, where people aren't seen as property, but still a playing field that doesn't take accusations and action seriously against people like this. And it's just really sad to me because this sets people back very, 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 very far. The amount of stuff I've seen, like anti-trans rhetoric and anti-LGBTQ rhetoric surrounding this person, has been astounding. And I'm not excusing it for the people saying it. Again, it always comes down to the person committing their actions. But this stuff with Ezra Miller, this reinforces public ideas of LGBTQ people or trans people that still float around and exist, of like them being nuts or them having mental instability and stuff like that. Now, I don't believe that stuff, but it does reinforce that angry rhetoric, that more confused and dislike what's different from me rhetoric in the world. This just reinforces that, gives people an example to point to, and it's just sad because it really bums me out, man. It really bums me out. I really liked Ezra playing the Flash, actually. I know a lot of people didn't. But I did. I really, really did enjoy it. And, of course, the people that Ezra goes after seem to just be these individuals who don't know who they are. The one young woman who said that, she had a threesome with Ezra, even said that she was lost as an individual at the time and addicted to alcohol and drugs. And of course, Ezra Miller, in kindness, opened up the room to this person, but, wanted sex, according to what they said. It's sad. Now, am I saying, by the way, that if I was a famous person, I wouldn't, one, I'm married, but that I wouldn't want to enjoy some of the fruits of life in terms of things that are legal, like going to different countries, maybe meeting people, things like that. No, of course not. A lot of people will conflate this with things that are totally fine. You want to go around and live a bachelor lifestyle and stuff like that, as long as you're keeping it above board and stuff. Your body, your choice, your money, your choice. I don't care what you do. But when it becomes this sort of psychological abuse that a lot of people have characterized it as, that to me is where it just becomes sad and hits a point of not being able to be redeemed and not really hitting an end point. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm sad about it, but I'm not surprised at this point. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. I appreciate you very, very much. I'm sure we'll end up talking about this again when Ezra Miller probably robs a bank or murders somebody, so stay tuned for that. Be sure to like and subscribe, and as always, everyone, stay shway.